first feature of the Treaty of Versailles was that the treaty was a diktat. Germany was not invited to the negotiations, and the treaty was imposed on them. Because of Germany's military collapse, economic and political turmoil, they had to accept. On the 28th of June 1919, the Treaty of Versailles was signed.
In terms of the Treaty of Versailles, the army was limited to 100,000 and used only internally. No air force. The navy was only allowed 6 battleships, no submarines. Germany had to accept the blame for starting the war. This had to compensate in these ways.
Germany had lost all its colonies. Germany lost land, Alsace-Lorraine. They had to give the output of the rich charcoal fields to France for 15 years. They lost 50% of its iron reserves, and plebiscites had to take place to decide whether other areas should leave Germany. This means that they lost 15% of their European territory, and the German port of Danzig was made international. The effects of the Treaty of Versailles was that the German people believed that the army had been betrayed by the politicians in Berlin. Therefore, the German people branded the politicians as the November criminals, politicians who signed the treaty. They also termed it as Dolchstoß, the stab in the back. Because they were unpopular, because the Treaty of Versailles was unpopular with the Germans, they felt that the army was never defeated and the Weimar Republic was doomed until...
After the Kaiser's departure, there was a time for extremist parties to flourish. There was huge political unrest. Ebert began to take charge very strategically and gradually. A council of people representatives was formed, a temporary government, which in February 1919 formed the Constitution in Weimar. The constitution in Weimar was made up of a local government run by 18 regions of Germany, a central government which was given more power than before, and the Reichstag, which was the dominant house of parliament. Members were elected every 4 years, and men and women over 20 could vote with a secret ballot. The Reichstag was a secondary house of parliament which could delay laws, and there had to be proportional representation, which means it's voted by percentages. The Chancellor was the man or woman who dealt with day-to-day affairs and chose ministers and needed the majority to pass laws. And the President, who took no part in day affairs, was very powerful and chose the Chancellors, but ruled by decree. Friedrich Ebert was the first president. He gained a lot of support. He promised General Groener there would be no reform of the army, and promised no nationalisation of private businesses, and ensured trade unions. There were some weaknesses. Coalitions were needed in the Reichstag, but they had to be made of 28 parties, which was difficult because they all wanted separate things. The Chancellor seemed weak by asking to rule by decree from Article 48, and in the end the Republic wasn't trusted.
One of the economic problems that happened to Germany between 1918 to 23 was the occupation of the Ruhr. French troops confiscated raw materials from the area of the Ruhr, where 80% of German coal, iron and steel were based there. And the German government resisted, but French troops arrested the people and brought their own workers. This brought more tension between the 100,000 troops of Germany versus the 750,000 of France, which meant that their debts increased, unemployment increased, and shortages of goods.
Germany's greatest problem was that its government was bankrupt. Its reserves of gold had all been spent in the war. The Treaty of Versailles made everything worse. Germany fell to their knees begging for downfall reductions of their 6.6 billion reparation, and the Treaty of Versailles deprived Germany of wealth, earning areas such as coal fields in Silesia and the industrial city originally known as the Ruhr. With no gold reserves and a dramatically falling income, by the year 1923 Germany could no longer pay. Prices of many things rose exceedingly high. Government needed more money to pay debts, and unemployment and failing taxes rose really high to its highest limitations. During 1919 to 1923, government had 300 paper mills and 2,000 printing shops.
As for the effects of the economic problems, the most important was
Germany's main problem was bankruptcy, and one of the main problems that affected this was everyone found it difficult to buy what they needed. People found it very difficult to purchase what they needed. This is stated as a very significant fact, since the German people could not buy the important goods that their family could function without. One main aspect was the shortage of food and supplies. People had to carry a large amount of money in huge baskets and even wheelbarrows. People were paid twice a day so that they could run through the city and buy goods before prices and incomes rose even further. Some suppliers and shopkeepers refused to receive money at all because of its lack of efficiency. Because of the money's lack of efficiency. So in turn, they asked for valuable items instead. This formed a huge effect to the poor German people, which indicates a large increase of poverty around the German nation.
The second most important effect was that everyone lost their savings. People lost insurance and pensions. This is really important because it affected the middle class, which made up most of the population. The third most important was shortages. In 1918, £1 was worth 20 marks. By 1923, it was worth 20 billion. Foreign suppliers refused to buy anything from Germany because the value of their money was so low. This is less important because it looked at Germany's effect worldwide and from the outside, not the inside.
Although the economical problems created a huge downfall towards the German people, there were some who benefited as well. Businessmen and industrialists who had borrowed very heavily profited as the value of their debts plummeted. Others hoarded goods, and foreign visitors had a high valued income since their currency ranked high in valuability against the German mark. However, this was not a big effect since only a small amount of people benefited from this crisis.
For political problems, there are both right-wing and left-wing politics. For the right-wing, they wanted to keep society very stable, strong government with powerful leaders. And then for left-wing, they wanted to change society and to treat people equal as they had communist leaders.
And mainly in 1918, right-wing German politics included many small nationalist parties, such as they hated communists for undermining the Kaiser. Left-wing Germany was dominated by the communists. For example, they wanted a revolution in Germany.
And for some of the problems that happened, that German people were angry with the support for extreme parties from 1918 to 1923. Things that they were possibly angry about were decisions not to fight on in 1918 by the Weimar leaders, and Germany regarded the Treaty of Versailles as punitive and vindicative. And from 1918 to 23, if German people were to support extremist groups, workers, for example, would tend to support communists for equality.
The Free Corps, they were demolished soldiers after the war. They numbered 250,000 people by March 1919. They were violent and took things into their own hands. 376 political murders happened later on, 1919 to 1922. The Free Corps saved the government from a communist revolution.
Also, for another political group, there was the Spartacist League. They tried overthrowing the government. They were a threat to the moderate government. Leaders for this group were Ronson Bank and Karl Liebknecht, and the Weimar Republic were able to put them down in 1919.
The Chappy Putsch was led by right-wing opponents of the government. By 1920, 500,000 right-wing by 1920 they had 500,000 right-wing supporters, and the unrest continued after the Chappy Putsch.
Nazis had 55,000 supporters in 1923. They also had their own private military called the SA, in which there were 600 members in the Munich Putsch. They also had big support from figureheads like Hermann Göring and Ludendorff, who were popular in Germany.
Causes of the putsch was the occupation of the Ruhr in 1923 by French troops helped fuel the Munich Putsch. Hyperinflation in Germany caused widespread economic suffering, and people therefore resented the Weimar Republic and turned to more extremist groups.
For the events of the Putsch, it started when Hitler stormed the beer hall with 600 SA troops. He then threatened the officials and made them agree to support him, only to find out the next day that they betrayed him and they now opposed him. So he sent 3,000 supporters to occupy buildings.
The results of the putsch. The Munich Putsch was a failure and it ended in 2 days. The Nazis were banned from parliament, and their newspaper Volksbacher was also banned. The NSDAP or the Nazis learned that in order to get power, they must not use weapons but play with politics. Hitler wrote Mein Kampf in prison, and NSDAP restarted in 1924 along new lines. Hitler was charged with treason and sentenced to serve 5 years in Lisenberg Castle.
Key facts of the Nazi Party organization and lean years in 1924 and to 28. The key facts were that Hitler improved the Nazi organization and finance of the NSDAP, the growth of the SA and SS, which were called the Protection Squad and were Hitler's loyal supporters. Dr. Joseph Goebbels and the Nazi propaganda was used as well. The weak Nazi results in the national elections.
Statistics. The relaunch of the Nazi Party was on the 27th of February 1925. In the early 1930s, the Nazis were receiving donations by big companies. The SA had 400,000 members by 1930. In 1925, the creation of the SS was the creation of the SS when the black uniform was introduced in 1932. However, there were positives as well. Gauleiters were appointed to control areas of Germany. The Nazis got fundings from giant German industries. SA had 400,000 members. The SS was introduced, and Nazi propaganda by Joseph Goebbels. There were also some negatives. Hitler didn't trust the SA as they were proved to be dangerous. Also, the SA showed loyalty to Ernest Röhm rather than Hitler.
Key terms: the Schutzwaffe, Protection Squad, the general elections, vote select members of the parliament, the Gauleiters.
I'll let it out, don't worry. Carry on. Go on, take over.
The causes of the Nazi Party organization, which the effects, the growth of Hitler's role, the causes, the growth of Hitler's role, enabling act, the events, relaunching of Nazi Party, 1925, administration and finance, expansion of the SA, Dr. Goebbels and the propaganda, and caused the lean years in 1924.
For the farmers of Germany, Hitler promised protection from the communists because they would divide up the land. And also how the Nazi support grows was the big businesses. He gained a lot of money because of making deals with Krupp, Benz and Bosch, which were huge businesses at that time. Also, for the women of Germany, although they couldn't work, he said they could play a big role, motivating men to be soldiers and to work to build up Germany to where it was before the war. And he also provided something for everyone, so every class was classed as equal. There was no class distinction, so everyone was the same.
Nazi support grew through Hitler's appeal. He proved to be a strong leader and united the country. He restored social unrest and persuaded other nations to view Germany in a better light. The strength of the SA also proved to be useful. They were used in rallies and were strong, organised, and disciplined. By 1930, there were 400,000 brown shirts, and they were the main strength of the NSDAP. Hitler also appealed to the working class. He promised work and bread, and also preached traditional values. The working class were also attracted to the Nazi Party because of the Germans' Worker Party. The middle class were also attracted to the Nazi Party because they were afraid of the communists and didn't want their assets taken away. This was highlighted in the Great Depression when they moved away from moderate politics, and although some did go to the communists, many did go to Hitler's Nazi Party.
A new currency was implemented known as the Rentenmark. This discontinued hyperinflation because the Rentenmark held actual value opposed from the previous currency. In 1924, the Dawes Plan allowed Germany to receive loans from the US. This allowed Germany to reduce reprimands greatly and build up a relationship between the US.
The most significant effect of the Stresemann era was the Dawes Plan. This was the plan that agreed that America would give Germany 800 billion marks. The second most significant effect was the creation of the Ronson Bank and the Ronson Mark. Stresemann set up a new state-owned bank known as the Ronson Bank and the new currency known as the Ronson Mark. The third most significant effect of the Stresemann era was the introduction of the League of Nations. Germany is given a place in the League of Nations, and they were also given a spot in the National Council, the group of countries in charge of the important decisions. The fourth most significant effect was the Young Plan. This plan reduced the reparations from £6.6 billion to £2 billion. This then made it possible for Germany to lower taxes and keep the people of Germany happy.